This is an unfortunate truth that a lot of men do not want to accept because the fantasy is often more attractive than the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation is not even paradise was enough for Eve. Okay, now those women that do not operate with the spirit of Eve, meaning they are not easily beguiled by the serpent, they are willing to take their punishment, because I do genuinely think that man and woman, their punishment from God is reflected in the archetype of man and the archetype of woman as a whole. And this branches out into deeper archetypes of the unconscious mind that manifest themselves in specific ways. But ultimately, what men have to realize is that it is not the case that women are always going to be in the spirit of Eve, but you also have to recognize that most of the women today are not wanting to take the burdens of life and really take their own cross. And the reality is that a lot of women are basically like children. And I don't need to say that to be, polarizing or anything like that. I'm simply stating the fact. If you've ever noticed, there's a lot of different kinds of philosophers in the past that have said this as at least paraphrase what I'm saying now in some way, shape, or form. And they were considered to be nihilists or woman haters. And I don't think that's what they were at all. In fact, I think they were just simply realists. And what a lot of the simps don't understand nowadays is that they want to have this image of what they perceive woman to be. Not necessarily, I want to make man and woman like an ideal right here, okay? If we were to take the man as an ideal and woman as her own ideal, and if we were to borrow Nietzsche's first sentence from Beyond Good and Evil, suppose truth is a woman, what then? Well, what exactly is truth? Well, it's kind of a lot like poetry, right? And there is a quote that says something like the truth is like poetry and most people hate poetry. But I don't think that the ideal version of man hates poetry, and I don't think the ideal version of man hates anything really other than evil and wickedness. Because in the story of Adam and Eve, Adam was moving forward and doing what God commanded, and he decided to let the woman lead where God told him clearly that he was supposed to lead the woman. And the punishment for Eve now is to have the desire for her husband. Well, you can look at that in a few different lights. You can see that as wanting to be like her husband, wanting to have the leadership and the power of the leadership in the relationship, which is something that has been brought to my attention from people that I've worked with in the past and that I've done consultations with. And even in the Regal Change Academy, this has been brought up in some instances as well. But also that these people that are operating under these spirits, they're not fully recognizing the punishment that God is giving them, and they're not taking the burden of that punishment. Well, let's recall what exactly the punishment is that God gives Adam and Eve. Well, to be as precise as possible without trying to paraphrase too much, Eve's punishment was to increase in sorrow, which is probably one of the reasons why God made women so emotional. I mean, these women, it's not necessarily their fault that they were made this way, but we have to act as men in accordance to the way God created these women. And this is not a dock on women. This is not trying to delude men into believing that all women are like this. Because I've met women that are sophisticated, that are intelligent, that are soft-spoken, but they also recognize their own emotional inner turmoil that goes on sporadically. And they even know that they can change their mind and their mood on the flip of a coin. And these kinds of women also, with their self-awareness, have a peculiar kind of grace about them. If you've met women like this, which probably most people have not, because there's not a lot of women like this in the world, but those of you that have met women like this, and I've even worked with women like this in my consultations and such, and these women are really making an effort in their own lives. Now, they also recognize that they do need a man. They do need a man, because the man provides that solidifying force, that gravity almost, that density to life. And the man is bringing her life in some instances. The woman multiplies it, and she recognizes this. And she doesn't think that she's an inferior being, but she recognizes that she has to follow the leadership of the man. Okay, so that's the punishment for Eve, right? And the desire for her husband. So increase of sorrow and desire for husband. Now let's look at the punishment for Adam. He basically has to work by the sweat of his brow the rest of his life. And what does that mean exactly? It means that in order to be a man nowadays, you've got to do everything that possible, and to know that you're going to return to dust. So not only do you have the burden of existentialism, you also have the sacred duty to continue work in the longevity for the rest of your time on this earth, which is one of the reasons why I think retirement is BS. Like, I get why people want to go into retirement, but like, I don't ever want to stop working insofar as my physical and emotional and spiritual body are operating as one. And I don't see that as me trying to overwork myself. I don't take days off really anymore either. Now, this is not to say that I'm incapable of having a good time, or that I don't take days to specifically worship God, but I'm at this point in my life, I don't personally see how I've earned the day of the Sabbath, for example. And a lot of people may disagree with me on this, but that's okay. Now think about in the Bible where Jesus says that the Son of Man is also Lord over the Sabbath. Well, God hasn't told me to rest. God hasn't told me to stop. He's, if anything, it's like he's telling me to put my foot on the gas pedal and get going, man. Like, get started. What are you doing? And I had that awakening, and I had that coming to Christ 2.5 years ago now. And ever since then, I've been full throttle. I've been going as much as I can, as fast as I can, and it's only improved my life as a man. And so what am I doing? I'm accepting the burden of the punishment of man as an ideal. And this is exactly what women that are accepting their burden and their punishment as an ideal. Like if we were thinking about man and woman as ideals, and a lot of people that are perhaps not godly, or that do not believe in God or know God, because I don't necessarily believe that it's a belief, like it's a knowing. You have a personal relationship to God. And so these people that do not have a personal relationship to God, they are the ones that have a complete misunderstanding and mistrust in themselves and in the other gender. And this lack of trust is fully understandable. This lack of trust is warranted, as far as I can tell, because there's a lot of women that are they've been used and abused in their relationships, and a lot of men have been used and abused. But we have to understand also that for women, a lot of women don't want to take that burden. I see a lot of men wanting and accepting the burden of their life, that God has punished them with. But I do not see a lot of women accepting that burden and their punishment from God as a whole. And it's like, well then, why should we be punished for Adam and Eve's sins necessarily, right? Why should we be punished for that? Well, if you were to look at this from a mythological perspective, or a literature perspective, or simply if you were to take Adam and Eve as literal, no matter how you look at it, there's a lot to tell about the story in itself. There's a lot to understand about the story in of itself. And I would say the precipitous moment that is upon us, and the platitudes of discourse that are being shot through the atmosphere, psychologically speaking, within our society, it's encouraging people to not bear that cross. It's encouraging people to not bear that burden of life. And I think that's a very not so good thing. I think that's a thing that is going to end up costing people a lot more than they actually realize down the line. And even me myself, I'm making sure every single day that I'm doing everything that I can to bear that cross. I'm doing everything that I can to bear that existentialism and move it toward a realm of positivity and creation. Because that's also what I think God wants us to do. He wants us to create. He wants us to multiply. And specifically, the women will be able to multiply. But you have to recognize, men and all the simps out there that may be watching this that are infuriated with this kind of video. If you're not looking at a woman's actions before you're looking at her words, then you've already lost. You've already lost. And I've met women that they want to be like wife material. In fact, even one right now that is trying to get my attention, and she's doing everything she can to appear wifey. But her past, when I found out about her past, I was like, well, I'm sorry, this is not going to be compatible with me and where I'm wanting to go. And fortunately, I saw this pretty early on, but now she's doing everything she can to try to make her be looked at as wifey material. And I've seen this kind of stuff before. A lot of the times women do this, and they'll do it just to look good for the moment, but then actually when there's a commitment, that's when things start to show. For example, there's a woman that I rejected from 7 or 8 months ago, something like that. It was a while ago. And at the time, I told her that I'm not romantically compatible with women that are in relationships or talking to multiple men at one time. Well, I was at the gym the other day, and I saw her with this new guy, and she was slapping him in the face. And she's like, and he was like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? Like, what are you doing that for? And she was just joking around me like, oh, I knew he wouldn't take that. Ha ha ha. So she's like openly trying to disrespect this man, knowing that it's disrespectful, because she's conscious of that. She's conscious of the disrespect. And I'm just sitting there like, man, that's exactly why I don't talk to women that are talking to multiple men at one time, because they're openly disrespecting the other men, and they don't know that. They really don't. And it's a shame, because that's not how things used to be. I remember my grandma, she told me that as soon as she started talking to my grandpa, if there was ever any other guy for the next 3 weeks that they were trying to call and trying to get her to go out with them and whatnot, she told them no. She told them no. Tell me how many times that's going to happen nowadays. That's going to be pretty rare. It's going to be pretty rare. But anyways, guys, I hope the message of this video was informative and insightful. I want to appreciate everybody that's moved over to the X platform over the past week or so, since I've been making that account more active. I also just got Rumble set up now. I had it set up a while ago, had some problems, but now it's fixed. So Rumble's there now. All of these links are in the description box below, so you can check that out. So with X and Rumble, those are going to be the two main places that I'm going to be able to talk about more things, and you're going to get exclusive content on both of those other platforms that's not going to be here on YouTube. And with all that being said, I want to also appreciate everybody that's enrolled into the Regal Change Academy. We've had pretty great turnout over the past couple weeks with everybody, and more people rolling in and more support in the community, and that's great to see. So if you want to join that, if you want to join the paid community, you can check in the link below as well. And if you want to just join the free community, the free Discord, that's also in the link below as well. So peace be with you. Till next time.